Shall we begin the verses? Shall we begin the verses? Victor Martinez with Goat versus Fish.
The verses never ended.
It never ended. It never began. It always was. It was always Goat versus Fish. It was always Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish on the stereo. Oh, what do you know?
What do you know?
Goat versus Fish with Victor Martinez on the stereo. Oh, how shall it go? Goat versus Fish brings the verses to you. We promise the verses we tell you are true. What's Goat versus Fish? You haven't a clue.
No clue.
But it is something to do. Listeners, we are speaking to you. We are speaking to you. It is something to do. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish is wherever you are. Whether you're near or you're far. Goat versus Fish with fence sitter Victor Martinez is wherever you are. Listen how they come in, how they come pouring into here. Goat versus Fish. Some say Goat versus Fish is a sham. Oh no. Some say Goat versus Fish is a scam. Some say Goat versus Fish is just spam. But I am what I am. And I am Goat versus Fish. I am Goat versus Fish. But I am
And Victor,
what I am.
the fence sitter.
Victor Junior Martinez, the fence sitter. There it sits on the fence. There it sits on the fence, choosing neither goat nor fish.
We got 5 listeners. Y'all better tell us what y'all are. Are you goat or are you fish? We need to know right now. Send it in. Tell us why. Let's get a debate going.
One is calling for Goat versus Fish. One is calling for Goat versus Fish. Are you ready,
We just
Victor
got a
Junior
versus.
Martinez?
Yes, play that versus. Play it.
Let us get into the verses. Let us get into the verses.
Yes, I am ready. Neo is ready for another round of Goat versus Fish. Yes, I am ready. And I promise this time I will try and not turn it into the roast of Victor Martinez. I promise. I'll try to be good.
It's Neo! Celebration for It's Neo! Welcome back to Goat versus Fish! Welcome back to Goat versus Fish! Roast
If I
fence,
remember
roast
correctly,
fence.
Neo was a fish, wasn't she?
We do suppose, yes, we do think It's Neo was a fish. We do think it was a fish, but this is a new versus. It is a new versus of Goat versus Fish.
Oh, that's right. Every day you could be something else. And for some reason, every day I'm on the fence.
Every
Never get off
verse is
this
on the
fence.
fence.
You're right. You know, that's a really relieving way to look at things. Would you say that every day is a versus, or is every hour a versus, every second an opportunity to change your verses? Is that what you're saying?
Goat versus Fish, yes, every second, day, minute, hour, eon. Yes, it is all one versus, and yet within each verses there is an infinite verses that you can divide the verses into infinite verses. So this is a versus, this is a versus. That was a versus. But this whole verses is also a versus. Yes. True verses.
So
True
there's
verses.
60 verses in a minute, 60 verses in an hour.
Well, we do not know exactly how it is you are counting your times that you call it. Goat versus Fish just speaks in verses of verses, but we have heard you speak of minutes and hours and eons. We do not know which one is longer and which one is shorter, but we do know they are all verses, yes.
Speaking of which, I want my Goat versus Fish watch, where like the minute hand and the second hand are goats or fish, one or the other. That'd be fucking brilliant. And like the Goat versus Fish in the center.
Goat versus Fish watch. There should be Goat versus Fish calendar. It should all be telling your verses by Goat versus Fish.
So many possibilities, so many verses. We got 2 in the chat. Let's go ahead and play them. Let's see what they have to say.
I'm here. I've been through a lot. I'm still on the fence.
All right.
Victor can say that I'm not.
No, you're totally on the fence.
I can't choose one or the other. There was photo evidence of fence sitting. It just is what it is. I accept it, but I'm leaning more towards goat. I believe.
Queen Machete, are you
Fish.
saying?
Definitely
Queen
fish.
Machete, you took a picture of yourself on a fence? Is that what you're saying?
Goat versus Fish wants to see it. Yes, if you have a versus of you sitting on a fence, tag Goat versus Fish, tag Victor Martinez on the Instagram. We wish to see this evidence.
Yeah, that'd be actually pretty impressive. I mean, as a fence sitter, it was always metaphorical for me, but to actually sit on one is a whole nother level. You really are a fence sitter.
Yes. If you are sitting on the fence, let us see it. Let us see if you really sit on the fence. Fence sitter leaning Goat, but then speaking of Fish, Queen Machete, you have come along versus with Goat versus Fish, we must say. When you came, remember Victor Junior Martinez, Queen Machete, when it first came into the verses, just the verses ago, it came in very strong, said, I am here, Goat versus Fish. This is what I have to say. I have to say this to Goat versus Fish. And now it has heard the Goat versus Fish, and now it has taken a more calmer, introspective verses, and it is more ponderous with Goat versus Fish, yes?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, all right, so at first I was like, I wanted to say, for sure a fence sitter, for sure a fellow fence sitter, but then a true fence sitter can't lean, all right? A good fence doesn't lean. So I say to you, Machete, you might just be some goat-made fence, if anything.
That is what fence sitter Victor Junior Martinez has to say. Goat versus Fish have seen many fence sitters lean Goat, have seen many lean Fish, but for now, Queen Machete on the fence. It is a fence versus the versus begins fence. The versus begins fence. We knew we should not have trusted Victor Martinez to bring a new versus.
All I'm saying is my fence is man-made. It's got nice 90-degree angles, no leaning, and it's reinforced at that. So I'm just putting that out there.
So I will start off by saying I'm definitely Team Finn all the way. I fully embracing my floppy, floaty fishiness. I'm into it today. I'm definitely feeling Team Finn. But I will say, we did establish last time that fence sitters are kind of like fish-like. So I've decided to make it my new policy, my new saying, my new slogan, Team Finn 2024, fence sitters get the gills. Straight up.
All right.
Fence sitters get the gills!
I need to be refreshed. All right, I've completely forgotten how a fence sitter is fishy. Please reiterate and explain that to me, because I forgot.
Oh, you are so high on the fence. You are so high on the fence. You do not even remember the previous verses. How do you even remember Goat versus Fish?
I'd probably forget my own head if it wasn't sewn on my neck. All right.
Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. But celebration for Fish. Celebration for its nail fish. Celebration for its nail fish. It's nailed up fish. And in the verses, we have one fish. We have one pitiable fence sitter that chooses neither goat nor fish. But celebration for joining Goat versus Fish. You are always welcome with Goat versus Fish. You know the verses. You know Queen Machete. We are pleased to have you here, but we have to maintain Goat versus Fish. We have to maintain Goat versus Fish in case there are others that are coming here and they are thinking of sitting on the fence. We need them to know, are you goat or fish? Are you goat or are you fish?
Well, there isn't evidence of me personally sitting on the fence, but you went to my Instagram and there was a giant nautical bird sitting on what appeared to could have been a fence, which was a pier, but it had the archetype of fence sitting. It definitely had fence sitting energy, and you captured it as like an aesthetic that I represented to the world, which I think really, really just encapsulated my fence sitting energy.
We do recall that versus. You know, Victor Martinez, they went and they just followed GoatVsFish right on the Instagram, and they said, "Oh, GoatVsFish, we are so pleased. We are so pleased that you are GoatVsFish, and you have brought pleasantness from your verses. We believe in you, GoatVsFish." What did they say to the fence sitter? What did they say to you?
You know, fence sitters don't get much love, and I understand. You know, as someone who's non-biased, usually spineless and just in the middle, just doesn't get any appreciation, and I accept that. I'm on the fence even about being contacted. It's okay. You know what? I just want to be at least acknowledged as one of the original fences. I mean, you know, a long-standing fence, a good fence. You know, a fence you can rely on. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to put that out there.
Well, there is no good or evil, only goat and fish, so we cannot give you that verses. But as GoatVsFish began spreading the verses in the what you call the standing up comedy verses. Of course, we have been spreading the verses forever. GoatVsFish. It is true. You were one of the first fence sitters that GoatVsFish encountered. Yes, true verses.
That's what I'm saying. This is a good, long-lasting fence. All right, you want quality fence. You don't want one of those fences that goes out after a couple of years. I've been a fence. I mean, shit.
You know, compared to GoatVsFish, you are just a blip in the verses. GoatVsFish has been here forever, GoatVsFish. We have seen fence sitters like you come and go. You think you have been sitting there a long time. You have barely even got up on the fence. You are going to fall off the fence before you can even verse it.
Because fence sitters are indecisive. They're sitting on the fence. They refuse to make a choice. And that is soft, that is squishy, that is pliable, that is going with the flow. Therefore, definitely fish.
You have been called pudgy in previous verses, Victor Martinez. It's true.
Okay, all right, listen. It's not that I can't choose. It's that I can see qualities and cons and pros in both. And it's not even a matter of being soft about the issue. I'm a very hard, strong fence, all right? This is a firm fence. Solid fence.
Hi, you may remember me as the one that could have been the goat, but could have been the fish, but was probably the fish, but a poisonous fish. I've since decided I am fish.
Oh.
Celebration for fish! Celebration for fish! Why does it not? Why does the verses go away? We were trying to write down what it is you are calling yourself, and then GoatVsFish wanted to write your name under fish, but now we cannot see it was some kind of Cheryl verses. Call in again, make another message for GoatVsFish, and we will write it in the column for fish. Celebration for fish! Celebration for the poisonous fish!
I'm telling you, it looks like it's gonna be a fishy night so far. A very fishy night.
Fishy night. If you ask GoatVsFish, well then that's just all right.
That's all right. Fishy night is all right.
We know there are two fish. Verses again. Send us a verses again. Send us a verses again, and we will make sure to make it written that you are fish. To make it written that you are fish.
I'm a fence that's been falling down for years.
Damn. I'm sorry to hear that, fellow fence sitter. Those things definitely happen. You got to be strong. You got to remain strong as a fence. If you're going to be the fence, you have to be the highest, sturdiest fence out there.
How does it feel to have other fence sitters looking to you for some sort of dependence?
I think, ironically, I'm the perfect fence to look to. All right, I think that if you look in any direction, you probably see this fence. The fence surrounds everyone.
How is River the goat?
He celebrated his 4th birthday today. He's a young, strong goat.
Mighty birthday to you. Mighty birthday to you. Mighty birthday, dear River the goat. A mighty goat. Mighty birthday to you and many more. And many more. But GoatVsFish, there's not yet a goat. We have fish. We
Well,
celebrate
I
the
mean,
fish.
okay. Machete was leaning goat.
Leaning
A fence
goat.
leaning goat, right? So we have a leaning goat, but not a full goat. We have a fence. We have like two fences. One of them's leaning goat and two fishes. No official goats. So any 5 listeners out there, are you feeling goaty? Are you feeling fishy? Tell us your verses. Drop them in.
No official goats. No goatal goats either. Goat versus fish. Did you know that verse giving is coming?
Oh, that's right.
Yes,
but that's more of a
verse
bird.
giving.
That's more of a bird thing, isn't it?
Bird. What is a bird? What are you saying to goat versus fish? Bird thing.
I'm just saying.
Verse giving.
Verse giving. There's a lot of. I mean, the main attraction is a bird. Perhaps bird versus bear would understand this particular holiday a bit more.
Bird versus bear understands nothing. Much less goat versus fish. Oh, you must not be thinking of Thanksgiving. No. Of course, we always give thanks to goat versus fish. But no, we are speaking of verse giving. Verse giving is a whole other verses. It is a whole other verses of goat versus fish. Do you wish to be educated about verse giving? Yes, of course.
Please.
I want to hear all about verse giving. Yes, thank you.
Tell
Very
us.
wise visitor. On the verses of verse giving, many verses ago, there were 2 fish. There were 2 fish. And one fish had seen many verses of goat, And the other fish had not seen many verses of goat. And the fish said, "Ooh, I am a fish, but I long for verses of goat. But I have never versed. And so the wizened fish, the fish that had seen many verses of goats, did give the gift of verses to the goat by becoming a goat. It gave the gift of verses to itself, because now it was goat. And it did show that fish that had never verses to goat. It showed it the gift of verses. The fish became goat. And it was goat versus fish. And it was goat versus fish. And you can reverse the verses in the verses of 2 goat. And then it is 2 goat. And then the goat becomes fish. And then it is fish versus goat. On verse giving, goat and fish will become fish and goat in order to give the gift of verses to their fellow goat and fish. What do you say to this?
Huzzah, or something like that. What is the exclamation?
Celebration. It is celebration.
Celebration. It's just celebration. That's right. You just say celebration, not huzzah. Celebration.
Huzzah if you wish. Huzzah is a celebration. Goat versus fish will say it with you. Huzzah! Celebration.
No, I like celebration. More.
So does goat versus fish. Message for goat versus fish.
You know, all I want for this Thanksgiving is bird versus bear and goat versus fish to get along.
Goat versus fish. You want goat versus fish to get along with bird versus bear. No goat versus... Wait a minute. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish is going to load verses of the Goat versus Fish podcast for you all to hear just what is bird versus bear. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Getting along with bird versus bear. Well, maybe if it chose goat or fish. Then
but it would never. It would never, would it?
It would never. Goat versus fish. Let us see. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish.
I feel like the verses that that you embody right now, the one they know as Michael Allen, would probably have an aneurysm if he tried to envelop both beings.
What are you speaking of? Now first they speak of bird versus bear, then they speak of Michael Allen. What are you just trying to fence up this whole verses? We are trying to make it a bit of goat versus fish. Let us see. It's some sort of deception. We are finding it for of goat versus fish. Goat versus fish.
Let us go ahead with the verses. 114. Let us see here.
Goat versus fish.
And what verses are we listening to? This is the GoatVsFish podcast.
Goat versus fish. This is Goat versus Fish podcast versus 67. Here it comes. You will hear bird versus bear.
Online.
For Goat vs. Fish, let us hear the first new message.
This is the Goat vs. Fish podcast. Now you are hearing Goat vs. Fish podcast versus 67. We are listening to the messages for Goat vs. Fish.
What message you have for Goat vs. Fish? Let us hear the first new message for Goat vs. Fish. To eat raw. This is Bird vs. Bear. This is Bird vs. Bear. Bird vs. Bear. This is Bird vs. Bear right there. Bird vs. Bear right here. Now listen to me, Goat vs. Bear. This is Bird vs. Bear. We're going to tell you right now, we do not care that you is doing no Goat vs. Fish podcast with no birds because you've been done kicked out of that there comedy store, Los Angeles, and that's all about Bird vs. Bear. You didn't see that it's showtime for Bird vs. Bear now. You didn't see that on that there, was this old comedy store documentary they got going, official trailer there on YouTube, where they Showtime doing some sort of official documentary on the comedy store Los Angeles. Guess who was there? It was Bird vs. Bear. Bird vs. Bear was there. Bird vs. Bear was there and you wasn't there. You see Bird vs. Bear right there, official. You see another trailer there. You can see Bird vs. Bear in the trailer there at 1 minute 45, 1 minute 44, 1 minute 45. You go see right there on the YouTube. You go see Bird vs. Bear, and you see that it ain't Goat vs. Fish. It is not Goat vs. Fish, but it's Bird vs. Bear. It's Bird vs. Bear. It's Bird vs. Bear. It's Bird vs. It's Bird vs. Bear. It's Bird vs. It's Bird vs. Bear. Not Goat vs. Fish. You was dumb. You was stupid. Yeah, you got more followers than Bird vs. Bear, but you ain't on no Showtime. Goat vs. Fish. Like Bird vs. Bear. That's on there. So yeah, that's gonna be on that there Sunday. It's gonna be Sunday. What do they call that there? It's gonna be Sunday, October 4th at 10 p.m. Sunday, October 4th, 10 p.m. That's just next verses there. So
that verse is such a gloat. It's such a gloat.
Not Goat versus Bear, and it's just gonna be Bird versus Bear. You ain't welcome there. You ain't welcome there. Comedy store welcomes Bird versus Bear. Now shut up. Shut up, Goat versus Bear. This is a Bird vs. Bear podcast brought to you by Bird vs. Bear.
It's so brash.
Oh, yeah, follow Bird vs. Bear on their Twitter bird there and all that their social media there.
At least Goat versus Fish, at least you're more like, I prefer, you're more graceful than Bird versus Bear, if anything.
Oh, isn't Goat versus Fish? Isn't Goat versus Fish?
Yes. I mean, I'm telling you, I just being reminded of that character. Oh my goodness. So much energy, so boastful and brashful, is just rough.
It comes because it is so insecure that it is not choosing Goat or Fish. It stands in awe of Goat versus Fish. It sits on the fence in awe of Goat versus Fish. It wants to be Goat versus Fish. But you expect Goat versus Fish to get along with this versus for verse giving? You expect Goat versus Fish to do this? Goat versus Fish is not going to be inviting Bird versus Bear to the verses of Goat versus Fish as long as Bird versus Bear is treating Goat versus Fish like this. Bird versus Bear is not even a real versus.
Is there
That's
tea?
right.
Is there tea? I feel like there's tea. And as a fish, I like to swim in tea. So what's this Bird versus Bear? Is there someone trying to steal the thunder? Trying to take the verses into nether regions? I'm intrigued.
Well, you just heard Bird versus Bear. You just heard Bird versus Bear, and Bird versus Bear. You heard what it was saying to Goat versus Fish.
Yeah, it's a rough thing, that just not pleasant.
Very unpleasant verses.
Like I don't think that versus even gets along with itself, let alone to get along with the Goat versus Fish. I mean, it just would never happen. Listen to that thing.
No, that one, Bird versus Bear. As soon as it was Goat versus Fish, Bird versus Bear says that Goat versus Fish stole the verses from Bird versus Bear, but it is quite the reverse. It is quite that Bird versus Bear stole it from Goat versus Fish. Stole it from
I'd have
Goat
to
versus
say
Fish.
so. Yeah,
stole it from Goat versus
right.
Fish. There are many just like Bird versus Bear that are out there. They confront Goat versus Fish and they say, we do not like you, Goat versus Fish. I do not like you, Goat versus Fish. I do not want to be a goat. I do not want to be a fish. It is a very stupid versus, but they just want to be Goat versus Fish. They just want to be Goat versus Fish.
That's right. Everyone does. Everyone wants to be the versus.
Okay, so I know we're supposed to like let them, like other people choose, but I'm definitely reading goat vibes from Bird versus Bear. Definitely goat. And I'm lay offended right now. I'm lay offend. I feel like a fish out of water. Glub, 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 glub.
Glub, glub to you, glub, glub to you.
Definite goat energy coming from Bird versus Bear. I can say that for sure.
You think that sounds like a goat?
Fence,
What?
Yeah, I could easily agree that Bird versus Bear probably leans goat as well.
Goat versus fish gets nothing but fence from Bird versus Bear. Nothing but fence. Nothing but fence. But you see a goat. You see goat. Goat versus fish is willing to hear your evidence. Yes. What do you suppose Bird versus Bear is goat? The next verse is that goat versus fish encounters Bird versus Bear. We shall tell it that you think it is goat. That you think it is goat.
It would just piss it off.
Yes, but it is always feeling unpleasant. That is nothing new for goat versus fish. Wanting to talk to Bird versus Bear when it is not pissed off is like trying to speak to a fence sitter when it does not have a fence post poking it in the posterior. It is just impossible versus. It will always have a bit of unpleasantness about it.
You know, you get used to it.
You just have to keep the energy of haters get you paid. Goat versus fish. Just like straight up. Haters get you paid. Just hold that energy, hold that verses in your mind, and it will work. It will manifest.
Haters get you paid, and the fish said, haters get you paid. Well, that just begs the verses. It's Neo. That begs the verses. Do you hate goat versus fish? Will you pay goat versus fish? Do you hate goat versus fish? Will you pay goat versus fish? Venmo at GoatVsFish. If you hate goat versus fish, pay goat versus fish. Prove your hatred to goat versus fish by paying goat versus fish. Yes, they celebrate. Celebration.
Yeah, guys, come on. Other than choosing sides, we also have to, we have to support the verses. Everyone's got to support the verses.
But goat versus fish will say this.
Speaking of verses, I'm sorry.
Mind your versus fence sitter. Goat versus fish. You may hate goat versus fish. You may hate goat versus fish. You may love goat versus fish. Any versus, any way you feel about goat versus fish accepts this. We have spoken to so many goat and fish and fence sitters that have so many ponderings of goat versus fish. But even those who hate goat versus fish, we will say, are you goat or are you fish? And they say, I hate goat versus fish. And goat versus fish will say, yes, you hate goat versus fish, but you still have not answered the question. Are you goat or are you fish? Yes, I do not like goat versus fish. Well, you do not have to like goat versus fish, but are you goat or are you fish? You're trying to distract goat versus fish. What do you have to say, fence sitter? What do you have to say to goat versus fish?
Well, I was just going to ask the verses. Did you hear about this? I think it was Young Jeezy and Gucci Mane verses. That was pretty cool.
Tell us about this. Tell us which is goat. Tell us which is fish. Let us hear of the verses.
I mean, I'd have to say that Gucci is a goat for sure. Jeezy is pretty fishy. I don't know who won that night. I think they said that Jeezy won, but it was a rap battle. It's pretty fun to watch. And, the verses, everyone's talking about the verses. The verses are hot right now. Anybody versus anybody. But, goat versus fish has always been around.
Goat versus fish has a versus for you.
Battle. That was a rap battle. So what if
goat and fish.
It was like a rapping fish and a rapping goat? I'd love to hear those if there's any out there.
Goat versus fish on the Twitch streams. There was one that came into the stream of Goat versus Fish, twitch.tv/Goat versus Fish. And it said, we want to hear freestyling goat and fish. They
exactly.
Asked this, and Goat versus Fish gave them a freestyle of goat and fish. We gave them a freestyle of goat and fish.
Really? It was rhyming and everything?
It was Goat versus Fish. It was goat and fish, and it was freestyling with goat and fish. And then along came the fence sitter, and it had no verses. It just had no verses. The fence sitter tried to rap the goat with the goat and fish. Yes, how was the rapping of goat? What was the rapping of goat? What was the rapping of goat?
Man, I wish we could hear that. That's fucking hilarious. I got to go back and watch that.
We will have to watch it, but we remember the fish said some verses as, I am the fish, as I am the fish, go splashy, splashy, go splishy, splish. And the verses carried on as this. Yes. That was the fish verses. Oh. That was the beginning of the fish verses, yes.
Bars.
Oh, and then it said to the goat, it said, The goat always saying that it can win, but you give us the hoof, and then we give you the fin. Oh, fish, goat, goat. And then goat had its own verses. But there are no goats here to share the goat verses, so goat versus fish. But yes, and then the fence sitter. We do not even it just came about, and it's the goat versus fish, and it said, I am the fence, and goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Boo, we do not like you, goat.
Well, it's pretty hard, because like not too many things rhyme with fence. So I get it. It's a little difficult.
Oh, goat versus fish knows what rhymes with fence.
What's that?
Dense. You are very dense. For a verse. For a verses. Just for verses. We are not saying that you are dense because you sit on the fence, but it is rather verses how dense does rhyme with fence.
There's a few words out there. Dense. What else?
Pretense.
I'd say you could probably do
Pretense.
something like a glasses lens could work, and
the fence is always saying how goat versus fish makes no sense. The fence says goat versus fish makes no sense. It demands a pretense from goat versus fish. There's no need for pretense. Do not sit on the fence. This is goat versus fish.
Hey.
Goat versus fish.
La la.
Goat versus fish.
La la.
Goat versus fish. This is goat versus fish.
And many more.
And then the DMCA fence sitter came down and said, we will slap goat versus fish with our fences. No, we demand no. DMCA, no. DMCA, goat versus fish. No, that does not constitute legitimate parody. No, goat versus fish. False verses. That verses of It's a Small Verse After All, that was written by goat versus fish. They stole it from goat versus fish. They stole it from goat versus fish. It was goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. But that is because goat versus fish is for all of you to enjoy. You can all enjoy goat versus fish. You can all spread the verses of goat versus fish. If we hear you saying, some verses, the comedian ones, they say to goat versus fish, oh, I could be goat versus fish. I will just get up there and I will say goat versus fish. I will just say goat versus fish. You are welcome to say goat versus fish. As much as you wish, say goat versus fish.
Please do. And who amongst you is a goat? We got 4 solid listeners. No real goats. What are we going to do?
Well, we are just going to keep up the verses. Oh, Goat versus Fish saw that if enough list, there's some sort of verses going on the stereo where if you get many to listen to you, they will give you fresh cash verses. Have you seen this?
Yes, sir. That's why I like being on here. It's a real, that's an incentive if I've ever seen any.
Well, perhaps they do not hate enough Goat versus Fish. If it's Neo the Fish has any verses to say of it, then they need to hate Goat versus Fish more for Goat versus Fish to get paid. Well, Goat versus Fish. Listen, if you hate Goat versus Fish, you hate Goat versus Fish. But why not pay to love Goat versus Fish? Why not pay to love Goat versus Fish? Ooh, Goat versus Fish. Ooh, the lover of Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish is a lover of goat and fish. Goat versus Fish is a lover of goat and fish. And even you, fence sitter. Yes, we love you. We love you, fence sitter. Do not despair. Do not despair. We may give you the verses. Fence sitter. But it is the verses of love. But it is true. Hate is also part of the verses. Everything is Goat versus Fish. Everything is Goat versus Fish. We will not deny this. We will not deny this.
There is no denying the verses.
Goat versus Fish, an interesting verses happened on the Twitch. We would like to tell you, Victor Jr. Martinez.
Please.
Well, in the chat, a goat said there was a council of goat, and then the goat said Texas for goat. They said Texas is goat. What? We declare Texas for goat. What?
They didn't take a survey, did they? I mean, did they get like an average or something?
They just declared it. They just declared Texas for goat. They said Texas is goat. Texas is goat.
So there was no study done. I mean, was that a question in the census this year? How did they know that?
They claimed the census. Please, Goat versus Fish. They were not even asking if you're a goat or fish on the census, which is really the only question they would need to ask if it has any sense to Goat versus Fish. But the Texas, they claimed to be of Texas. They say, we are of Texas, and we are here to say that Texas is goat. Now, Goat versus Fish was not there to accept that versus because we think that it is for Texas to say if it is goat or fish. Goat versus Fish should go to Texas to ask if it is goat or fish. Goat versus Fish. So then there was a fish that gave 10 bits to Goat versus Fish. This is a sort of donation to Goat versus Fish. And it said, we use these 10 bits as a fish to buy Texas, said the fish. They are buying Texas, said the fish. So Goat versus Fish had the verses. Goat versus Fish had the verses. Well, let us do a poll. We did a poll of Goat versus Fish. And we said, you can buy a vote in the poll. You can pay verses. You can pay bits to Goat versus Fish to buy votes in the verses because, it's Goat versus Fish. And any verses, there could be any verses with Goat versus Fish. And the fish bought Texas for 7 bits. The fish bought Texas from the goat. The fish bought Texas, Victor Junior Martinez. The fish bought Texas. The goats were sleeping on the fish. The goats were sleeping on the fish. There were more goats in the verses. They were saying that Texas was goat. And then when it came time for the verses of buying Texas, it was only the fish. It was only the fish. Fish bought Texas.
I, Nao, of the formal delegation of Team Finn, Team Fish, have sent love for the verses to Goat versus Fish's Venmo. All hail the verses. We support the verses, even though we are not of the hateration contingency. We are not of the hateration contingency. We are purely representatives of pure fish love. And we also claim the state of Oregon in the name of fish. I formally declare Oregon in the name of fish.
Oregon.
Formal fishy request.
Oregon is a fish. Damn, she bought it for some bits too.
Oregon fish. Oregon, 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 the original fish. Oregon goes for fish, Oregon goes for fish. Will any goat contest it? Will any goat contest it?
As a
no
fence
goat
sitter,
contest. Wait up, stop the verses,
contest.
stop the verses. We were just going to celebrate It's Nail the Fish for buying Oregon for fish and for the contribution to Goat versus Fish and for the love for Goat versus Fish. But then this fence sitter had his verses to say, very well, fence sitter, what do you have to say to Goat versus Fish?
I'm just going to put it out there that I'd like to contend the Texas being a goat or a fish. I forgot who. But fence sitters are usually broke, right? You'll find that there's quite a bit of fence sitters out there that just can't make the bits to claim.
Oh,
but
no.
I just want to say, I don't agree that Texas was it goat that bought Texas? What?
Texas, the goats declared it for goat. The fish bought Texas, and now Oregon has been claimed for fish. You have been claiming to be of a place of Texas, yes?
Yes.
So you are speaking from. We do not want to say that the fence has any authority over goat versus fish, but you have been to that place. You have been to that place. Yes?
I have. I'm here now. I'm in Austin, Texas, and I don't know. Is it fishy? Is it goaty? It's hard to say because I'm a fence, but I'd be interested to see how many we can claim out there. Tell us your states. Tell us your verses. I really want to know, you guys.
Yes, what is the state of goat versus fish? What is the state of goat versus fish versus goat versus fish? Goat versus fish versus goat versus fish. Goat versus fish versus goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. What state are you from? Is it a state of goat? Is it a state of fish? Are you in a state of goat versus fish? Goat versus fish is quite in a state. Now, goat versus fish. Victor Junior Martinez, let me tell you something, fence sitter. Do not say that goat versus fish never did a versus for you. Because we do not know the contribution of It's Nail Fish. It could be a large versus, it could be a small versus. In either versus, we give celebration. But fence sitter.
That's right.
Fence sitter, because your fence is broken, we want you to get off the fence, it's true. And if you lost a few verses, perhaps you could. But we do not want you on a broken fence. No, we do not want you on a broken fence. You at least be safe on the fence. At least be safe on the fence. So whatever verses that It's Now has given To Goat versus Fish has given to Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish will give you half of that versus. That is a promise of Goat versus Fish. That is a promise of
what a sweetie.
Goat versus Fish.
On that note, let's get back to the celebration of It's Now and her conquering of the fishy. What was it, Ohio?
Oregon.
Oregon, my bad.
Yes, it was Oregani. It was. The Oregani fish. The Oregani fish. Celebration. It's Neo the fish that makes sweet offerings to Goat versus Fish. Oh, how verse it is. A verse such as this emboldens and strengthens Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish gives the verses for free. They are just as pleasant. You shall see. But even though the verse shall always be free, well, between you and me, it is always pleasant. It is always pleasant to receive a few verses for Goat versus Fish. It's Neo the fish. Ooh, a very rich fish. At least to Goat versus Fish. Celebration for Neo the fish. It is. Celebration. And a notification for Goat versus Fish, but it is not a message for Goat versus Fish. Notification. The notification says, do not miss any updates. Enable push notification. No. False verses. They give a notification to Goat versus Fish to ask Goat versus Fish to receive a notification. What is this fanciness? What is this fanciness for Goat versus Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? Leave message now for Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish, yes. Are you Goat or... Yes. True versus. Vote now. Nice versus Victor Jr. Martinez. Goat versus Fish.
I just want to know.
Yes. Oregon. So Oregon for Fish and Texas for Fish. We will have to see who shall win the election of Goat versus Fish. But it's now says Fish 2024, Fish 20. Why not Fish 2020? Why not Fish 2021? Why not just Fish all the verses? Why not just Fish all the verses?
Right now, it's projected Fish. The country is projected Fish, but that could change at any moment. We're still counting the ballots.
We are still counting the verses.
We're still counting the verses.
It is anyone's verses. It is anyone's verses. Oh, here comes Goat. Here comes Goat. Stop the count. I am a goat, and I demand that you stop the count. The fish. It has been a false verses, and too many fish in too many places. You should not be counting the votes of fish, of illegal fish. And it should be Goat, and then along comes the fish. I'm a fish, and it is the goat that is the illegal goat, and the true verses is fish. Do not believe the false verses of the goat. It is fish. We have a very strong legal representation of fish. The goat knows not its own verses. It says it has evidence. It claims evidence. It says it has no evidence. Order in this verses. I'm Goat versus Fish. We demand order in this verses. The court of Goat versus Fish is now in verses. The court of Goat versus Fish is now in verses. State your case to Goat versus Fish. State your verses to Goat versus Fish. If you swear on the verses, the whole verses, and nothing but the verses, we will hear. What is your case? Bring your case before Goat versus Fish, before the honorable Goat versus Fish. This verse is now in session.
I am happy to answer this. I am closer to the ungulate with the split hoof, chews its cud. Yeah, said it. Closer to that than the fish. Actually, quite offended that I'm even dignifying out the response. Your mama.
Wow, worm. Okay, worm. Okay, but which state do you claim as a goat? It sounded very goaty, but where does the goat come from? Is this a Montana goat, Texan goat? this right now we have Oregon and Texas fish out there. You gotta, yeah, I like the verses. And that was a good description of a goat as well. He's super goaty, earthy vibes. Good job, Worm. As a fence sitter, that's a good goat right there. I can see way up out here on the fence.
As a fence sitter, you see nothing from the fence. You see nothing from the fence. That worm did not declare goat. That worm did not declare goat. It was just rooting around in the soil beneath your fence post. It was leaning goat. It was saying that it is probably goat, that it is more goat than fish. Listen here, worm. Listen here, worm. This is goat versus fish. We want you to be proud and confident in yourself. If you want to be goat, then be that goat. Then declare goat. Then declare goat. And as for legitimization, you do not have to dignify goat versus fish with your response to goat versus fish. Goat versus fish has all the dignification. Goat versus fish has all the dignification that could ever versus for goat versus fish. You not wanting to dignify the question, the one true question of goat versus fish, soon it will be you that is asking them the one true question. You will be asking them if they are goat or fish, and they will say, oh, I will not give you the dignity of versus. I will not give you the dignification. Goat versus fish. Listen to Goat versus Fish. Thank you for your message for Goat versus Fish. Thank you for your message for Goat versus Fish. We are here. We are versing for you. Choose goat. Let us hear another message. If you're going to be goat, then be that goat. You pesky worm.
Shh. I cannot give away the fishy takeover. I cannot. It is a secret versus. That the fish shall maintain supremacy over all, including the fence sitters. Beware the mommy shark.
Along comes goat, along comes goat, along comes goat. You see the fish is withholding evidence. The fish is withholding evidence from the court of goat versus fish. How can we expect to have a fair and even versus in the court of goat versus fish when fish is withholding evidence? How did the fish approach the verses and got to speak freely with goat versus fish? Oh goat. What is this? This is a kangaroo court. Silence! Order in this verses, goat. Order in this verses. A kangaroo is not a goat or a fish. Are you accusing this judge of being on the fence? Are you accusing goat versus fish of being on the fence, goat? We are sorry, goat versus fish. We did not mean to suggest that you were a fence sitter. Your honor, goat versus fish. And that's better, goat. That's better, goat. Mind your verses. We hear you, secret fish. Go about your shark verses. Go about your mommy shark verses. We know that you can try. Celebration.
I didn't know that the fishes were like a dark cabal. Like they're like the secret. I mean, it sounds like fish own the media or something. Like that's scary. What the hell?
Mediation. Welcome to Finn Network. The next message for Goat versus Fish.
This goat hails from the Holy Land. Indeed, brought back by the Knights Templar. It is the Baphomet, with great titties and hooves and horns and that stupid look on her face. God, she's so hot. I gotta go worship one out.
Celebration for goat, celebration for the holy goat, celebration for the holy goat. It claims to be Baphomet, goat versus fish. I've been wondering, is Baphomet a goat or a fish? They're always saying to goat versus fish. Baphomet, oh, it's surely goat, Baphomet is surely goat, but goat versus fish has never met Baphomet. We have been looking all over for it, to ask it if it is goat or fish. We have been looking all over for these ones. They are calling themselves Zeuses and Thors and all kinds of, and Shivas, and goat versus fish is just wondering, are they goat or are they fish? Are they goat, are they fish? Some say goat versus fish is a king. It's true. Some say goat versus fish is a prophet. Some say goat versus fish is a god. We find it rather odd. We find it rather odd. We only claim to be goat versus fish. Celebration for the worm goat. Celebration for the worm goat. Yes, worship goat if you wish. Goat versus fish does not command you to worship goat, but if you wish to worship goat, then you may do as you wish. You may do as you wish. The worm is goat, and the worm is now giving the gift of verses, giving the gift of verses to fish. There's a goat in the verses. It's Neo and that other fish. Oh, sorry, we wanted you to leave another message for goat versus fish. But now we have a versus. Now we have goat versus fish. At last we have goat versus fish.
Wow, it's so funny. It never occurred to me that Baphomet is a goat. Yeah, it's true. Baphomet is the goat. It's one of the main goats. Scary looking goat, I'll tell you that. I mean, most goats are ugly, but goddamn, that one right there with the 6 titties and 6 arms, I don't know what it's got.
Goats are known. They are known for the milk of goat. Yes. 6-titted goat. And a horny goat, and a very horny goat at this. It's goat versus fish. We celebrate the goat. We celebrate all goat. We celebrate all fish. Look, there seem to be all these faces of ones that are just coming through, and we do not know if they are here because we see their face because they are saying, "Oh, we like goat versus fish," or they're just stopping in the verses. If you just came to goat versus fish and you are wondering, "What is this? What is this?" Just tell goat versus fish. Tell goat versus fish if you are a goat or a fish. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you fish?
And don't even
or are
think
you
about
goat?
it. That's the best thing about it is you don't think about it. Just say it. I think that's very important to put out there.
We are asking about you. This is a versus about you.
Consider. Don't put too much thought into it. Just go with your heart. Quickly, just press that button and say what comes to mind, goat or fish.
Okay, goat, sure-footed. Fish gives you the side eye. All right, I rest my case.
And goat versus fish. Goat versus judge. Goat versus fish has heard an evidence of goat. Worm has submitted evidence that goat are sure-footed and that fish are side-eyed. Do we hear any objection from fish? Do we hear any objection from fish?
I am a wonderful beta fish.
A vessel for goat versus fish. Celebration for vessel. Celebration for vessel, the beta fish. Stay as long as you wish. Oh, get on the carousel. Get on the carousel, oh vessel, the fish, the carousel, that is goat versus fish. The verses, it goes round and round. As you hear so many goaty fishy sounds. Goat versus fish, celebration for vessel, the beta fish. Thank you for joining Goat versus Fish. Follow Goat versus Fish. Thank you for being a part of the verses. And Victor Junior Martinez, what do you have to say to Vessel, the new beta fish?
Fishes may be side-eyed, but it's still a fishy night. There's definitely more fish out there tonight in this versus right now than there are goats. There's only about one goat to, 3, 4, 5 fish?
There are 3 fish. 2 fence sitter. We do not know some of these goats or fence sitters, they may have left the verses, but as far as the verses, as far as we know, there have been 3 fish with Vessel the beta fish celebration, and there has been 2 fence sitters, Chris's Fumagalis and Queen Machete. It's Nano the fish, bringing up the fish with the first fish, Vessel the fish, and then the CH fish. Please send another message to Goat versus Fish. We wish to know your verses. And Worm the goat with short but poignant verses.
So yeah, one goat basically, right? One goat.
It is holding down the verses. It is not afraid of the fish.
I know, but 3 fish, that's like a school of fish, right? That's quite a bit.
No, it is a school of fish. School of fish, this is Goat versus Fish University. Goat versus Fish University. Here's the question. A fish is part of a school of fish, whereas a goat is part of a what of goat?
I do give the side eye. I fully accept the side eye of the fish into my being. Because that's truth. That is reality. Some things deserve the side eye.
Fish looking out the side of its eye of goat. Look at the side of its eye of goat. The goat would put itself before the fish, and the fish simply turns its side, turns the broadside towards the goat, and looks at it sidely at the goat. Wow, amazing
So
verses.
judgy. These fishes are so high and mighty and judgy.
It says, there are some verses. You must look sidely. You must look sidely at the goat. This is a nice. Imagine a fish looking sidely at a goat, and then the goat begins to charge the fish to goat it with its horns. But then the fish, it is already moving on the fish axis, and it just swims away from the goat. It just swims away from the goat. Nice verses. Ooh, now they are speaking to goat versus fish.
Goats can eat anything. Fish die if you overfeed them. Advantage, goat.
More evidence has been brought before the court of goat versus fish. Worm the goat, it is being very direct in its verses. It is saying goat can consume anything. Fish who can overfeed. Bailiff fence sitter. What do you say? What do you say to these verses?
It depends on the size of the fish, to be fair. But I like, all right, here's a fish that I like: shrimp. Okay, that's a fish. And those things eat anything, all right? Shrimp will eat cocaine off the sea floor. So that's all I'm saying.
Is shrimp a fish? Is it a shellfish?
Yeah, easily. I don't know. I'm not a marine biologist.
A shrimp looks like a horn of a goat. It looks like a floating goat horn to goat versus fish. Oh, it is really coming in now for goat versus fish.
Okay. Vessel's cool, but come on, guys. Los Angeles Rams or Miami Dolphins? It's your choice.
Oh, my.
Ooh, getting into the sports versus. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. LA Rams versus Miami Dolphins. LA Rams, goat. Clearly goat. Dolphins, well, for the NFL, the National League of Fence Sitters, yes, so many Eagles versus bears. No, it's not bird versus bear. There are so many that they should all call them team names goat or fish. Team names goat or fish. But at least the Rams are clearly goat, and the Dolphins are, well, for the National League of Fence Sitters, we can accept that Dolphin is fish. Rams versus Dolphins. What is your versus? We do know this, that the Rams are goat, and then they played in a Super Bowl with one Tom Brady, and they all claimed Tom Brady was a goat. Was this some sort of goat-on-goat versus? Was this some kind of goat-on-goat versus, Victor Jr. Martinez? Rams versus Tom Brady goat.
I don't know, but they're saying, all right, so are you trying to say the Cowboys are fish?
You will have to ask it if Cowboys is fish. Goat versus Fish did have a Goat versus Fish podcast with one that is called Jared Odrick. And Jared Odrick did play in the NFL. It's true verses. They say it was a tight end, an end that sat on the fence, perhaps. And it was speaking to Goat versus Fish about CTE. It was speaking of the headbutting verses. The headbutting verses usually associated with goat. And we had a conversation at the Comedy Store Los Angeles. If you look for verses 56 of the Goat versus Fish podcast on the YouTube, you will find Jared Odrick, football, NLF, National League of Fence Sitters, the Comedy Store, Goat versus Fish podcast. You can hear all about that verses. And because it had experience with the NLF, we asked it if the Cowboys were goat or fish, and it gave some verses to Goat versus Fish, though we are not certain. We are not certain what it would say to Goat versus Fish. We would have to listen to the verses again.
Speaking of verses, let's go ahead and play these verses before they build up and get old.
First off, a dolphin is not a fish. It's a mammal.
Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish wants there to be Goat versus Fish, and wants there to be dolphins for fish. But we do not deny this versus the dolphin. The dolphin really, It is one of those verses as the whale. Is it goat or is it fish? If you think a dolphin is a goat or a fish, let us hear your evidence. Let us hear your evidence. Victor Junior Martinez, any verses? Any verses before the next verses?
I mean, does something being a mammal mean automatically it's not a fish? Is that science? I don't know. I'm not good at these things.
Goat. What does it stand for? Greatest of all time. Fish. What does it stand for? Fapping in stranger's house.
Oh, my verses. Oh, my verses. Oh, my verses. Verse versus goat. That is a classic verses. Worm, you are wise beyond your verses. You are just laying down classic verses after classic verses. Goat, sure-footed, eat anything. Greatest of all time. You know the classic verses of goat. Celebration, celebration. As for fapping in someone's house, strangers' houses. Fapping, do you mean flapping like the fin of the fish? Has a fish ever done this to you, Victor Junior Martinez? Has a fish ever fapped in your strange house, in your strange fancy house?
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Fishes do that all the time. It's a pretty fishy thing to do. They do it. They'll look at you with the side eye while they're fapping. It happens.
Ooh, from the side of the verses, so they can get along with their verses slightly obscured from you, looking at you with the side eye. They say, "Yes, we see you looking at the fapping fish, but do not come to really look at the fish. You just stay in that verses, and fish will be here, and you can just be over there, side eye fish."
According to the verses of Google, a group of goats is called a trip.
This is the second verses that Goat versus Fish has heard this trip, a trip, Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. What is called a group of goat?
A trick or trip?
It did say, we believe it did say a trip, and yet Goat versus Fish, thought that Goat versus Fish, we thought Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish thought it was a tribe of goat. Goat versus Fish.
A murder of fish.
A murder of fish. It's a murder. The murder of fish. Goat versus Fish. Now here's the verses. Reference.com. Pet animal groups. The proper collective noun for a group of goats differs from similar animals. For a verses, a group of sheep is known as a drove, a flock, or a herd. These are fairly recognizable words, not to goat versus fish. They do not sound like goat or fish. But they are not properly applied to tribes of goat. Here it says tribe of goat. Goat versus fish always heard tribe of goat. Send your evidence. It's Neo the Fish. Send your evidence in the Instagram. Send your evidence of this trip of goat. That is the second versus Goat versus Fish has heard it. We wish to judge Goat versus Fish. We'll examine the evidence. Goat versus Fish will examine the evidence.
Yeah, these fish think they're so fucking smart because they spend their time in a school. And I dropped out of high school. But who's laughing now? Huh? Yeah. Oh. Fuck.
Well, it sounds like you were laughing, Victor Martinez. What were you laughing about?
That was so fun. I just love the attitude of Goat. I mean, oh, like a bro dude Goat.
Goat versus Fish believes it found that fish. It was Sheriel Yannette. That was that fish. Thank you, Sheriel Yannette, for following Goat versus Fish and for choosing fish. Thank you, Worm, for following Goat versus Fish. Thank you, Vessel, for following Goat versus Fish. Thank you, Noe, for following Goat versus Fish. Thank you, Mutual Reception, for following Goat versus Fish. Celebration. Goat versus Fish accepts you. If you dropped out of school, Goat versus Fish, you can still be a wise goat. You can still be a wise goat. You are wise for accepting Goat versus Fish, even at first, when you thought, why am I giving Goat versus Fish this dignification? Now, this is not to say that you are wise because you did drop out of a fish school. That is not to be making you wise for a versus. Remember, it is always the verses to learn more about Goat versus Fish.
Never be satisfied with your knowledge of goat versus fish. Continue to ponder goat versus fish. Always seek out more knowledge of goat and fish. You may even seek knowledge of the fence if you are feeling very confident. Goat versus fish. Continue your learning with goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. How goes that versus? Give goat versus fish. Just the versus. Goat versus fish. Ah, yes. Goat versus fish. Fish versus goat. Goat versus fish. Fish versus goat. Goat versus Fish University. Come and learn the verses at Goat versus Fish University.
Goats just die. That's all.
We heard Goat versus Fish, and what did it say to? What did Vessel Fish say to Goat versus Fish?
It said they die.
They die. Who does die? What? A goat or a fish? What did a goat or a fish die?
Yeah, Vessel said that goats die, which is not false.
It's not a false versus.
No, it's a factual verse.
The goat and the fish do come to an end. Woe is goat versus fish. The goat versus fish do come to an end. What do you say when a goat or fish go? A loved goat or fish that you did so well know. You wonder, oh, how can I go on? Just remember this song. It is still goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. It is still goat versus fish. It is still goat versus fish. And you can versus as long as you wish. You can versus as long as you wish. Carry the verses of goat. Carry the verses of fish. And get out there in the verses. And get out there in the verses. But we celebrate. We celebrate all the fallen goat and fish in their mighty verses. May they verse on forever. May they verse on forever in the after verses, whatever it may be. For what comes after goat versus fish? What comes after goat versus fish? Goat versus fish comes after goat versus fish. It is still just goat versus fish.
The earth is 2/3 covered by water. Therefore, fish maintain the overall surface of the earth supremacy. More fish homes, fish supremacy. All hail the fish.
Celebration, celebration. We have heard it as an evidence. This is an evidence in the court of goat versus fish. This is an evidence in the court of goat versus fish. A classic versus. Worm, you thought you had all the classic verses of goat. It's Neo coming in with the fish verses. 70% of the earth is the sea of the fish. How can goat expect to achieve domination over fish when they do not even control the majority of the verses? Victor Jr. Martinez, what do you say to this?
You know, as a fence sitter, I like equilibrium. I like, I like everything to be balanced. There's a lot of facts for both, but it's not fair to say that it's a fish world. It's just not fair. I wouldn't say it. I would never allow it.
Goat do be goat. Fish do be fish. Do be goat versus fish. Do you be goat?
The shrimp is not a fish. The shrimp is a sea bug, sir. A sea bug.
Worm says that a shrimp is a fence sitter. Worm says shrimp is a fence sitter. If any goat or fish wishes to contest this versus, you can say so to goat versus fish. Fence sitter, what do you say to this versus? Are you going to bug goat versus fish and say some other verses?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. We can't necessarily ask a shrimp what it is, but it tastes good. You know, that's a fact.
If you have just finished a rousing session of coitus and your partner says to you, you're the goat, that's a great compliment. But if your partner says to you, you're a fish, fuck like a fish, you want to fuck like a goat? Do you want to fuck like the greatest of all time, or do you want to fuck like a fish?
Jesus, okay.
We will have order in this versus. We will have order in this versus. Worm the goat, worm the goat. This is a resubmission of already presented evidence of the greatest of all time to goat versus fish. Now, you made some verses about being called a fish after a coitus, but because the main verses of your verses was to say that goat was the greatest of all time, you have already submission to this verses. Your verses is overruled. You have already submitted this verses to goat versus fish. Repetition! That was repetition to goat versus fish.
Well, then why does the dolphin smell so fishy? Answer that, vessel.
Oh.
A question, Worm. This is... Do you realize what we have here, Victor Jr. Martinez?
What do we have?
we have goat versus fish. Worm the goat and Vessel the fish, they are engaged in a mighty versus as we speak.
It's true. It's very true. And they haven't really acknowledged it, but yeah, they're going at it right now.
Oh, yes. Oh, mighty versus. This is what we want from goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Fish versus goat. Victor Jr. Martinez just watching it from the fence, just getting more fancy with each passing verses. Why do we even spend our verses with Victor? Follow Victor Martinez. Follow Victor Martinez. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Goat versus Fish on all social media at Goat versus Fish, and especially on the Twitch celebration.
You say fapping in stranger's house like that's a bad thing. Doors close. Private time can happen.
Bold fish.
Wow.
Bold fish. Wow. This fish is saying, to fap as a fish, what could be more verses than to fap as a fish? Enjoy the verses. Enjoy the verses. Fap away, says the fish. Fap away, says the fish. And just close the fence behind you and keep your side eye open for any goat, for any pervy goat that would want to spy on the fish. Get your own versus goat.
That's one of the points that the goat Worm brought up was like, what if someone told you that you fapped like a fish, that they looked at you and they said, you just made love to me like a fish. I mean, he said that like a bad thing. I don't know. It's interesting. I really made me think about fishes and how they mate. They usually have eggs and then the male fertilizes them. It's very efficient. And I mean, who's to say that's wrong? I don't know. I'm high on the fence right now.
It is so much impregnation. It is true. The fish just sprays its verses all over the fish eggs and creates many fish. Creates many fish. So many fish.
Some people are into that. Here on the fence, I've heard of those things.
Yeah, well, think about this. The goat bleats. Okay, we all know the goat goes meh. What sound does the fish make? No, it doesn't make a sound, does it? It's a mute. It's probably good, because it probably wouldn't say anything worth listening to anyways. Goat for life.
Laying down the verses. Look at this goat. It bleated for goat versus fish. This is a mighty goat. Worm the goat really, really coming into its verses here. It is challenging you, fish. It is challenging you to make a sound of fish. Will you meet the goat? The goat did bleat at you. It said you make no sound. It said you have nothing to say anyway. Fish. Are you just going to take this verses? With your side eye? The goat, as the fish, excuse goat versus fish, as the fish was fapping in the stranger's house. The goat bleated through the fence. Meh! Distracting the fish. And as the fish was fapping, the goat said, "We bet you do not even have anything to say, fish. Will the fish continue to fap? Will it respond to goat? It all depends on the verses. Of fish."
I think dolphins definitely make noises. They have different dialects based off of, regions. And whales, definitely whale noises. There's all types of marine animals that make quite a bit of different noises, as opposed to the dolphin who only bleats. All right, just going to put that out there. Just going to say that.
You say the dolphin bleats.
Well,
speaking of goat?
Goats bleat. Goats only bleat, but dolphins can make different dialects. Dolphins, I mean, they have all types of different languages. They rape each other, and they talk a lot of shit. I think dolphins get high off of pufferfish, now that I'm thinking about it as well.
High on the fish. Wow. We have heard of high on the fence, but high on the fish. Now, goat versus fish, because we are so wise in the ways of goat versus fish, look up fish sounds. There have been secret recording of fish in recent verses where you can hear the sound of fish. You can actually hear the sound of fish. We suggest you listen to it. It would be very educational to you.
Also, life started in the ocean. Therefore, all life was at one point fish. Fish supremacy.
Now, this has been contested. This has been contested by some goat. But as far as goat versus fish can verses, they say that all life on the verses began in the sea of the fish, began in the sea of the fish. Is this to say that all the goat came from fish, that all the goat came from fish? This is not what goat versus fish says, but this is what the ones that the goat and fish of this place, that is what they say. That is what they say. And who is goat versus fish to tell them that that is not the true verses? All life comes from the sea of the fish. Even the goat come from the fish. Is this to say that the fish spawned the goat that did come back to verse them? They spawned their own verses? Wow. Wow. What an epic verses. What an epic verses.
It's getting hard. It's getting deep right now. This court's getting hot.
Now, I think we've all either seen a goat in water or could imagine one in water. Now, imagine a fish on land. Imagine a fish out of water. What do you see? Yeah, it's flapping. It's flopping around. It's dying. Either that or it's being eaten. Yup. Sushi.
And the goats challenged the fish. The goats challenged the fish to come to the land of the goat. Oh, if you are such a mighty fish, then come to the land of the goat. Come to the land of the goat. We will make sushi of you and consume you, said the goat. It's Neo. Are you just, what do you say to these verses? You are a fish. Have you been to the land of the goat? You are a fish. You are a fish. It is saying a fish has never been to the land of the goat, but you are a fish. Have you been to the land of the goat? You can speak as fish. There are no other fish. There are other fish here, but you are the speaking fish. These verses, goat versus fish. Are we going to have to give it to goat? Are we going to have to give it to goat? It's Neo. You are having a mighty verses. You are having a mighty verses.
I would like to resubmit this whole acronym situation. GOAT technically stands for Grungiest Orange Arse Thumper. Fish is fantastic, iconic, sassy hoe that is spelled Heaux. For the evidence submission. Exhibit A.
Goat versus fish.
Wow.
Ooh, an submission of evidence. A submission of evidence. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. We sustain your verses. We sustain your verses. You may make whatever acronym of goat and fish that you wish. It is up to the goat and fish. It is up to the goat and fish. We wish you to resubmit your fish. We know that the H was HOAX and there was some other verses before it, but we do question grungiest orange arse humper. Is this to say that to hump an arse is an unpleasant verse? Is this what you are telling to goat versus fish? The fish, the fish that was in a prior verses, relishing the verses that it was fapping in a stranger's house is now blaming the goat for being an arse humper. This seems a bit cross verses to goat versus fish. What do you say? Victor Martinez, fence sitter?
I'm just loving the show. You know what? A classic fence sitter style. I'm really enjoying both sides of this. In the end, the verses and the fence sitters win.
What did you say? In the end, the fence sitter wins?
I mean, yeah, we're winning. I feel like I'm winning just by watching this all go down. No one's attacking me. Too high on the fence.
Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Now, the fence sitter cannot truly triumph. It is only for the goat and the fish to triumph. But you are saying that you are winning by enjoying goat versus fish. Well, we do like that you enjoy goat versus fish. We will sustain the verses.
I submit for the court's approval the fact that goats being scarce increases the value. Because we all know that there are plenty of fish in the sea. This abundance necessarily means that their value goes down. It's like fishflation. Advantage goat.
Goat versus fish, the submission of this is a Keynesian goat. This is a Keynesian economic goat. And it is suggestion to goat versus fish that if we look at the supply and demand of goat and fish, that is the question. You wish to say that there are too many fish, then this is fishflation, and that the goat is valuable because there is so few goat. But you will have to demonstrate to goat versus fish. We accept this evidence, but you must demonstrate to goat versus fish that there's sufficient demand for goat. Is there sufficient demand for goat? There does not seem to be much demand for goat, seeing as you are the only goat. But if you can demonstration that there is demand for goat and that there is not as much demand for fish, perhaps there are plenty of fish, but perhaps there is high demand for fish. Do you demand goat or do you demand fish? Victor Junior Martinez, do you demand goat or fish?
You know, I'm getting a bit concerned. They always say there's plenty of fish in the sea, but I heard that there's a shortage of fish in the sea actually lately. So who knows? I know no one's really looking, no one's talking about any shortage of goat. There's never been a shortage of goat, I don't think.
Goat versus fish has heard this. Have you looked at the verses? The fish, they are dying in the sea. The fish, they are dying in the sea. It is true. It is true. Each verses, there is less fish. There is less fish. There is less fish than in the previous verses. Even the mighty tuna fish, they are saying one verses, it may not exist. This is what they are telling goat versus fish. Protect the land of the goat. Protect the sea of the fish. We want more goat. We want more fish. We want epic verses for all verses.
That's right.
Fresh ideas start here. Fish.
Oh, fresh ideas start here. That's enough. Fresh verses from the vessel. The vessel just sneaking into the verses. Vessel, we thought, the beta fish was just waiting for the perfect verses to lay down the verses. And it says, fresh, goat versus fish. Fresh, was it fresh innovation? Fresh ideas, yes?
I like fresh fish.
Celebration. Fresh ideas start here. We keep it fresh with the fish. Nice verses. Celebration. Goat versus fish is going to make it written. All of these verses, every acronym you provide for goat versus fish will have a tome of acronym of goat versus fish. Every acronym you have of goat versus fish, submit it to goat versus fish. You can even make an acronym for the fence if you wish. We are going to make it written.
I would think that, at least in my case, because I have the particular set of body and bits that I have, that being like a fish is ideal because fish are wet. So for my situation, me being wet during coitus is a positive thing. All hail the fish.
Oh, it is that wet-ass fishy. Yes. Nice wet fish. Yes, what do you say, worm goat? Now let's keep the verses nice and goat versus fish. But it has said to you that if you want to call it a fish, well, that is a wet fishy. That is a wet fish. It is a wet fish. Wow, amazing verses. Celebration. But Victor Junior Martinez, seeing as you are a fence sitter, you wouldn't know anything about this verses, would you?
No, I don't. But I'm enjoying. Like I said, I'm just enjoying the show high atop this fence.
I make lots of sounds when I fap, so I don't think those are appropriate for stereo, but I'll let you have a little taste.
Easy there, Fancy. Let's keep it nice and goat versus fish. Thank you for the sample. The fish, the brave fish, giving a sampling to goat versus fish and to Victor Junior Martinez. You're always welcome to, stereo. Would you accept this versus? Well, you should. It is part of goat versus fish. The sexy verses have always been part of goat versus fish. Would you deny it? Oh, they will speak. They will speak of the death of a goat or fish. But will they speak of a sex of goat and fish, of sex between goat and between fish? Yes, sexy verses. Goat versus fish. It is all part of goat versus fish. Thank you for this look into the sex life of a fish. The wet versus a fish.
You know, all I heard was that fish are the past and that land mammals are the future. Goat up.
It says the future is goat. It says the future is goat. It is a declaration. But you did say you merely heard this. Judge Goat versus Fish wonders, where did you hear this versus? Is this just hearsay to Goat versus Fish? Have you heard that the goat are the future, Victor Julio Martinez? Have you heard, Goat versus Fish? It is saying that because the goat came out of the sea of the fish many verses ago, that the past is the fish, but the future is goat. Ooh, interesting verses, interesting counter verses. Bailiff Fensitter, what do you say to this evidence?
You know what? I hear a lot of things high up on this fence, but that's not something I've heard lately. I don't know. Maybe that's like some goat rumor they've just been telling each other.
Everybody's taking fish oil for their health. Nobody's out here squeezing goats for their oil. Just saying. Omega-3s. Fish supremacy.
Wow.
Omega-3. Oh, wait, Goat versus Fish. If it is going to be omega-3, it should not be. No, it should be. Omega-3. Omega-3. Oh, look how it be. A fishy omega-3. Take it for your hair and your hooves if you're a goat that does really care. Thank you for fish supplementation. The supplementation is celebration. If you want more healthy fish skin elation, and perhaps even a bit of that fish masturbation that we have been hearing so much about, check fish oil out. Check fish oil out. Now, where is fish oil for the paid sponsorship from Goat versus Fish? That is what we want to know. That is what we want to know. Goat versus Fish. Have you taken fish oil, Fensitter?
No, but I probably need to. What is it good for? Skin or something?
Well, we will let that to be the description of the fish. But also, it's Neo the fish. We wanted to know your acronym for fish that ended with ho, spelled Hoax. You had a versus of fish when you said that goat was the great orange arse humper. And then you said that you had another versus for fish, and we want to hear that versus for fish.
Jordan versus Kobe, and to some lesser extent, versus LeBron. Are they arguing over who is the fish? I don't think so. Advantage, Goat!
Oh, you call this an advantage for Goat? What Goat versus Fish sees in that versus is that so many Goat, greatest of all time. It is a classic versus of Goat. We don't deny this. But how is it that all of the Goat, there are so many Goat that all claim to be the greatest of all time? They say, I am the Goat. No, 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 there can be only one Goat at the exclusion of other Goat. It should be Goat versus Fish. The Goat should versus the Fish, and instead the Goat, they are attempting to versus one another, all claiming to be the greatest of all time. How can it all be so? How can it all be so?
I don't know.
Who is the greatest to you? Who is the greatest to you? If you had to choose a Goat.
To me personally?
We are asking you. We have brought you along for this fancy ride. So what do you have to say?
I don't know. I can't choose a goat. They're all so great. You know, every goat's so great. I like fishes too. That's why I'm on the fence. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Remember, if you have a question for Goat versus Fish, we will take your questions for Goat versus Fish. If you have a question for fence sitter Victor Martinez, you can ask it a question. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Victor Martinez.
I do not deny that the fish is wet, but you see, the fish has now admitted that it is wet behind the ears, that it does not have. Double advantage, Goat.
Wet behind the ears, wet behind the ears. Interesting verses. Have you heard of this verses? Is River the goat, has it ever been wet behind the ears?
That's like when you're starting off at something, right? Like you're still wet behind the ears. That means like you're a rookie.
We are going to see. Goat versus fish. That is an ancient verses, but it still checks out. Wet behind the ears. Goat versus fish. Let us look. We look into the reference of goat versus fish. The references of goat versus fish. Wet behind the ears. Inexperienced often because one is young. For a verses. You'll never win this case, for with fish as your lawyer, fish is just out of law school and still wet behind the ears. Wow, that is a verses. Wet behind the ears. If the fish claims to be wet and surrounded by the sea of the fish, then it would be wet behind the ears and inexperienced in the verses of goat versus fish. Wow, goat versus fish and all the verses. We have never heard this verses. Thank you for this verses, goat. Celebration. It's Neo. You are a mighty fish. And this goat is not relenting. Now, not all of its verses have been not all of its verses have been true goat verses, but it just keeps coming at you. What do you do? We know you are there. We know you have your verses. Goat versus fish. Remember, goat versus fish is on the Twitter at GoatVsFish. If you have any verses for goat versus fish, you wish to say goat is as this, or fish is as this, or we have something to say to the fence sitter, you can say it, and you can at GoatVsFish on the Twitterver, and we will surely retweet your verses. We will retweet your verses, and we will also ask if a tweet is the sound that is made by a goat or a fish.
I'm so happy that I got my first banned message. I'm too hot for goat versus fish. I've made
it.
What is the meaning of this verses? Translation for goat versus fish from the fence.
I think he said something that was taken off. I think he might have gotten a message that might have been deleted by admin or something. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. He said something about being too harsh for stereo. What'd you say, Fumagalli Chris?
We believe it said too hot for goat versus fish.
Oh, maybe. Shit, I don't know. Maybe he got Explain yourself, Chris. What do you mean by that? What happened there?
Yes, what did happen?
Okay. Since she's making some of my arguments for me, I'm going to go ahead and make one for her. Maybe it's the goat that is the past, as it is the age of Aries that gave way to the age of Pisces, which will end soon with the dawning of the age of what? You know the rest.
Wow.
Oh, worm the goat. You do not even know the verses you have just begun. You do not even know the fish. Which verses? You do not know where comes from this fish. Do you remember Victor Martinez from the previous verses? Do you remember from this fish? It's Neo from the previous verses. It is very wise in this verses. It is very wise in this verses. Worm, you have opened a can of worms. You have opened a can of worms, and now we know that worms are goats. So you have opened a can of yourself. Goat, you have opened a can of yourself. Just wait. Just wait until the goat gets back to you. The goat you are going to open the can of yourself, and then that fish is going to chew on that can, like as if it were a goat, and it will say, no, but the goat are supposed to chew on the can, not the fish, and it will say, but we know, for we are the Astro Hose, and hose is spelled Hoax, just in case you are concerned about goat versus fish.
Yes, I did DM you the acronyms to your Insta, but I will say it again. Goat is the grungiest orange arse thumper for the T. Thump. Don't forget the T. And for fish, it is fantastic, iconic, sassy ho. With the ho spelled Heaux, for flair. Fishy flair.
Fishy flair, fantastic, iconic, sassy ho. Wow, Hoax. It did say Hoax, yes?
I've never heard of that spelling, but I'm pretty sure that's what she said, yeah.
Yes, but Goat versus Fish thought that was a hoax. Is that to say that the verses, it is admitting that its own verses are false? We do not know. We do not deny. There are some verses you can spell goat, you can spell fish. Many ways you can spell goat and fish. We are not denying this verses. We are just to be saying that we have heard that some may claim But you are calling yourself a false versus. That is all we are saying is goat versus fish. Beware fish. Beware fish. Beware fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Confirmation code sent to goat versus fish. Now logging into the verses. The messages for goat versus fish. Yes, the messages for goat versus fish. 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 It sends the verses. It sends the verses. Goat versus fish. It is HEAUX. Clever verses. Clever verses. Clever verses. Nice versus fish. Nice versus fish.
Oh no!
What is goat versus fish?
What happened?
Goat versus. Just being fancy to goat versus fish. Fensagali. Once more for goat versus fish. Once more for goat versus fish. Now, fence sitters, we know we want you to choose goat or fish. We know we want you to choose goat or fish, but we are not trying to eliminate your verses. Goat versus fish can take your fancy verses. We can take Victor Junior Martinez. We can take the verses. Once more, send your verses. Goat versus fish is going to very carefully the verses now. Carefully the verses.
Just remember, fish eat worms. Just saying.
What more needs to be said? What more needs to be said? It sounds like you were on the hook. It sounds like you were on the hook, goat. Sounds like you were on the hook, worm, goat. Very strong verse. That may be one of the strongest verses we have heard this verse is. It is calling into question itself. It is saying, you wish to call yourself a worm goat? Well, as a fish, we consume many goats of worm. We consume many goats of worm. How is worm goat going to wriggle its way out of this one? Do you think it can do it? What do you think?
What
do you ponder?
I mean, I think a worm loves the challenge, as most goats do. All she's doing is goading him, I think.
Getting its goat.
HEAUX. Very French. French fish.
Poisson. StereoVS poisson. Thank you. Yes, we have accepted your correction. We have accepted your correction in the case of goat versus fish. This is goat versus fish. Is this Fensagali?
Okay, I'm really glad she brought that up because that's simply not true. Those are night crawlers or grubs. Those aren't worms. And another thing, if you see that early bird, tell him I'm fucking looking for him. Punk bitch. Goat for life.
Goat for life. What? Goat for life. First verses. Now you are speaking of. This fence sitter is not called this fence sitter. It's called that fence sitter. This is suspicion enough to goat versus fish. And then the next verse is you say that you are going to try to versus a bird as if it is bird versus bear. This is not bird versus bear. This is goat versus fish. This is not bird versus bear. This is goat versus fish. We will say it once more. This is not bird versus bear. This is goat versus fish. And any who would say that bird versus bear is goat versus fish is telling you a false versus. Do not believe it. Victor Junior Martinez, you have seen bird versus bear. You have seen goat versus fish. Is it the same verses?
No. Those are very, very different verses. I mean, I would like to see what Worm thinks of that particular verses, but they are different verses.
Bird versus bear. Bird versus bear, it really don't care. Oh, bird versus bear. Fence sitter, bird versus bear, it really don't care. It really don't care. It will just tell you to go away. Bird versus bear does not even want you to stay. Bird versus bear has a very fancy game to play. It wants you to go away. It wants you to go away. Don't trust bird versus bear wherever you are, no matter how near or how far. Don't trust bird versus bear. Bird versus bear will take you and earn your trust and then leave you, and then it will leave you with nothing to do. Bird versus bear has nothing to offer. Bird versus bear will steal from your coffers. Bird versus bear is a lying old cheat. And if you think that is neat, then you can follow bird versus bear, but goat versus fish. Goat versus fish brings the verses to you and says, how do you do? Says, how do you do, goat versus fish?
Have you ever heard somebody describe the smell of a dirty vagina as goaty? No. The goatee is something else.
Now, goat versus fish. Victor Jr. Martinez, we have been wondering this question. Perhaps you can help goat versus fish. Is a vagina a goat or a fish?
It's neither, but they have been known to smell fishy. But then again, I could easily hear someone saying, that one smelled goaty, and that it's like, not goatee, but goaty, and that's like honestly a worse description of a smell than a fish. Like, generally, if something smelled like a goat, I think it's much more not stronger than a fish smell, but just not. I mean, you don't smell it as often. People are pretty used to fish smells. They're not the worst thing in the world, but a goat, like a huffy goat breath right on your nose, probably unpleasant for just about anybody. Most people have smelled fish. It's just not that big of a deal anymore.
Goat versus fish. It seems perhaps the fence sitter has reversed its verses. It seems perhaps it has reversed its verses. But goat versus fish, yes. When goat versus fish says everything is goat or fish, says everything is goat or fish, goat versus fish, that does not stop at what ones they are calling a vagina. No, we ask everything. We ask everything. Is it goat or is it fish? There is no verses that goat versus fish will not ask. Is it goat or is it fish?
In terms of this astrological reference that my colleague learned here has declared that Aries then gives away to Pisces, then gives away to Aquarius, which is the water bearer. All hail the fish.
Goat versus fish, true verses. When that goat said to you that it was followed by the age of Aquarius, this is what we call in the court of goat versus fish. This is what we call the verses of discovery. The verses of discovery, yes, this was an evidence that the goat did present to you. It gave you this verses, and it was your verses, and it is a verses of fish. It is a verses of fish. Now, goat versus fish does not know of the Aries and the aquariums and of the Geminishes and all of this. We are trying to learn if they are goat or fish. It seems some might be more goat. It seems some might be more fish. But that is why we have fish like It's Neo and goat like Worm to tell us, and even the fence sitter Queen Machete, who we do not know if it is still here, to tell us all about these verses so we can learn if they are goat or if they are fish.
Bird versus bear is ridiculous. We've all played Banjo-Kazooie. We know they get along.
Well, you will just have to tell that to bird versus bear. Don't tell that to goat versus fish. We do not want to hear it. Goat versus fish. Bird versus bear get along. Bird and bear do verses. Goat and fish. Do goat and fish get along? Do goat and fish versus? It is goat versus fish, the goat fish. We know that you are just trying to tell goat versus fish that bird versus bear is a false versus because it is not bird versus bear, but it is some sort of bear bird. But it's just more fenciness to goat versus fish. It's just so offensive to goat versus fish to even try to make some sense of bird versus bear when it is clearly goat versus fish. Look around you. What do you see? You see goat and fish. You see goat and fish. It is goat versus fish.
Sling that Gucci cock in my Gucci ass. Suck my cock, eat my fucking pussy, yeah. Suck my dick, grind down, fuck on a pussy, yeah. Ooh. Suck my nigga dick, ooh. I'm a fucking faggot clit, ooh. Touch my nigga dick, ooh. Yeah, I just have fucking AIDS, nigga, and I need you guys to fucking assassinate me, please.
Are you
That
goat
was a
or are you
fish.
fish? Are you
That was
goat or are you
sushi.
fish?
Sushi's fish. That was a fish.
Sushi is fish. Do we really have to say that that is a fish? We do, don't we? It called itself sushi. It had fish right in the verses. Goat versus fish. That that sounded to go. It just sounded like fence to goat versus fish. But it did call itself sushi. I mean, that is fish. It is fish. Very well, sushi. You are a fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. But you do know that this is goat versus fish. If you are going to give verses to goat versus fish, then you want to hear about goat versus fish. Want to hear about goat versus fish? We have heard fence sitters that can lay down better bars than you. Sushi fish.
You know what happens when you go all the way with the fish? Yeah, you jack off all over its eggs. You fertilize the eggs. The fish is gone. What kind of love is that? What kind of love is that? Fish love.
Oh, I wonder who wrote the book of verses. Is this such an unpleasant verses? We would not be surprised if some fish would say, yes, come, yes, let us fool about, and once you are done with your verses, we want you out of the verses. We come in, we celebration, we make a sexy verse together, and then away with you. We know that this is not for all goat and fish, but we suspect that some fish would find this very pleasant. It depends on the goat and fish. What of you, fence sitter? Do you like to hang about?
Oh yeah, I love it. I'm when I'm not sitting on the fence, I'm just hanging about. It's been a good verse.
I'm fish, nigga. I hope this helps. I'm fucking fish.
Celebration
I knew
for
that.
fish. Yes. We knew you were a fish. And we do celebrate the fish. All goat and fish are special to goat versus fish. But we would not be surprised if there was some goat and fish in here that would tell you to mind your verses. But that is not for goat versus fish to say. But mind your verses, fish. Mind your verses, fish. This is goat versus fish. Goat versus fish is for all goat and fish. Goat versus fish is for all goat and fish.
I reject Sushi's claim on fishdom. I am the resident loudest fish in the room. I am Queen Mommy Shark, and I revoke Sushi's right to fishdom.
Interesting verses. The fish would claim that sushi fish is not a fish. Now we are in very serious verses. The verses has become a very serious verses. The verses of goat versus fish is that it is for each to say for themselves if they are goat or fish. If this one says it is a fish, then no matter how unpleasant we may find its verses, it is not for goat versus fish to deny that it is a fish. We would never deny that you are a fish if you claim to be fish. We would never deny that a goat is a goat if it claims to be a goat. That would not be very goat versus fish. This is not to say that the fish is pleasant to goat versus fish. This is not to say that the goat is pleasant to goat versus fish. But a fish says it is fish. Who is goat versus fish to say that that fish is not a fish? Goat versus fish. Now, fish, if you as a fish, it's neo fish. We understand fish. If you wish to excommunication this fish, that is between you and the fish. But goat versus fish cannot deny it is fish if it claims to be fish, no matter how unpleasant you find its verses, no matter how unpleasant goat versus fish does find its verses. It is the verses of any goat and fish to declare if they are goat or fish for themselves. That is a true verses. So if you wish to make some sort of rule of fish among your fellow fish, that is for you to do. If you wish to excommunication this fish, that is between you and that fish. But it is goat versus fish.
We just had a self-identified fish admit to having AIDS. Okay. I rest my case.
What is your case before goat versus fish? Are you saying that we should not aid the fish? Are you saying that we should not aid the goat? What is your versus to say a fish has AIDS? A goat has, what do you mean by this versus? Are you meaning to say we should reject the fish for this versus? That does not seem like goat versus fish. We accept the goat and fish. We accept the goat and fish. We will. Goat versus fish brings aid to goat and to fish, and we accept the aid of goat and fish. What are you laughing about, Fence Sitter?
Just the idea of a fish with AIDS was funny right off the back. I know it's not. It's very. It's not right to laugh at, but it was funny.
You rest your case. You rest your case. Well, if you rest your case to goat versus fish, goat, that means you have nothing more to say. If you have nothing more to say, then goat versus fish.
In response to Worm wanting to know what kind of love is that, all I have to say is, what's love got to do with it?
What does love have to do with it? Is love a goat or a fish, Fence Sitter?
Gosh. Oh, no. That's just a feeling. It's just a versus. Love is a versus.
The verses of love. The verses of love. Ooh, that is a mighty verses. Many goat and fish have been engaged in the verses of love, have been locked in the verses of love for an eternal, it seems, an eternal verses. Some verses of love, the goat do triumph. Some verses, the fish. Some verses, the fish do triumph. Love is as ancient a verses, nearly as ancient a verses as goat versus fish. But in the beginning, there was goat versus fish. The love you give to goat versus fish does not know if love is a goat or a fish. But we do know that when you give love to goat versus fish, that the love returns to you. For goat versus fish comes from within you. Goat versus fish comes from within you. We love you, goat and fish. We love you, goat and fish.
Sushi fish is not a fish, but the dolphin is a fish? Okay.
Okay. Whatever you say. Goat versus fish. What do you say? What are you trying to say to goat versus fish? We do not know what you are trying to say to goat versus fish. Okay.
I will not deny Sushi's right to self-selection. Self-determination is important. I hear you. I feel you. But I am a judgy fish. And I will take ownership of my own authenticity in its authentic, judgy side, i.e. fishdomness, and excommunicate it from my fishiness.
We accept this verses of Neo. We accept this verses. We accept this verses from you. We accept this verses from you, just as we accept the sushi fish. We do accept the sushi fish identification. We accept your verses to be as you are. Your verses to be as you are. To be as you are. We know it was saying things that did not sound as it had a whole verses that did not have goat or fish in it. And this makes goat versus fish a bit suspicious of this fish that might be a bit fancy, although it calls itself sushi. It's so fish. Oh, goat versus fish. Goat versus fish does not like to see when fish separate from fish or goat separate from goat. We want goat and fish to come together. But we know fish. You keep your school of fish. You do keep your school of fish. And we cannot deny that you can keep whatever fish among you that you wish. But we do hope that all goat and fish can come together in one mighty and epic verses of goat versus fish.
Okay, here goes my case for goat, not against fish. Although all arguments for goat are indeed to fish's detriment.
Get on with the verses.
Cashmere sweaters. Fancy. Expensive. Made from goat hair. Yeah. What do we make out of fish? Nothing. Can't make nothing. You can't make boots. You can't even make a tasty vitamin. What can you make out of fish? Huh?
Oh, getting very sassy, the goat. Getting very sassy itself. Is this true? Can you make boots out of fish? Fence-sitter, have you seen what can you make out of fish?
Yeah, you can use fish scales to heal skin. I know that much.
True versus Goat versus Fish was not even going to say this because Goat versus Fish did not want to intimidate the goat and fish. But say it again. Fish to skin, yes?
Yeah, you can do that. It's a medical thing. Lots of burn victims get fish scales on them. They're all like cleaned up and whatnot, and it helps for healing. Yeah, and they don't do that with goat skin.
Goat versus Fish has never seen a grafted goat skin, but we have seen a grafted fish skin. You can make your very self out of fish. You can make your very self out of fish. Goat versus Fish has found Boot Barn. Searching the intrawebs, Boot Barn, and it says for $129.99 you can get horsepower boys fillet 2 fish Western boot square toe. We did not really comprehend what that meant other than fish, but it seems that it is a boot and that it mentions fish. That is what Goat versus Fish has come to determine of this boot. Is it goat or fish? Kid sees the day fish print boot 2. Anderson Bean Youth horsepower cognac fish. Tony Llama Leviathan chocolate big fish boots. Oh, Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. The fish boot. If it is a fish boot. Goat versus Fish. What is this fish all about? What is this fish all about? We will have to research more of this versus. More, they keep speaking to Goat versus Fish. Remember to follow Goat versus Fish. The Funny Witch followed Goat versus Fish. Thank you, The Funny Witch, for following Goat versus Fish. Celebration. You are very funny to Goat versus Fish. You are very funny to Goat versus Fish. Yes. We follow all who follow Goat versus Fish. We follow you who follow Goat versus Fish because we will follow you and then we will hear you speaking and then we will leave a comment and say, we are Goat versus Fish. And then you will say, what? We do not remember you. And then we will say, aha, you just followed Goat versus Fish because you wanted Goat versus Fish to follow you. You did not even realize what was Goat versus Fish. And then Goat versus Fish will say, are you goat or are you fish? And then they will say, oh no, I was not expecting such a powerful versus of Goat versus Fish.
Your Honor, Goat versus Fish, would you like me to be done? I can't be done. I have much fighting left to do. Goat forever.
We do not want you to be done. We do not want you to be done. The versus has just begun. The versus has just begun. Goat versus Fish will adjourn the verses when Goat versus Fish says it is Goat versus Fish. You may continue to present your verses. It is really you who keeps saying to Goat versus Fish that you rest your case. That is what you are saying to Goat versus Fish. If you wish to rest your verses, then rest your verses. If you want to continue your verses, then continue your verses. It is up to you, Goat.
Goat versus Fish. Is it possible for you to procure another goat? Being teamed up by fish with AIDS. This is it's getting kind of dicey. Give me a goat. Give me a goat. Goats,
yeah, where
come
those
to
goats
my aid.
at?
Not to give me AIDS.
Now let us say
such a long verses, and there's only one goat. He's got a point.
That is a true verses. This goat. Remember, did we not say at the verses that it is verse giving? And on the verses of verse giving, we do celebrate this goat. We celebrate this goat for giving the verses to fish. For giving the gift of verses to the fish. Now, of course, the fish are giving the gift of verses to the goat, but this goat is holding down the verses on its own. That is a celebration. That is a celebration. Celebration for worm that holds down the goat in the face of many fish, Celebration to its Neo the fish, who keeps versing that goat, And celebration to Vessel the fish. Always, you never know when Vessel the fish is going to come in with that verses.
Fish to skin contact is ill-advised, and everyone should consult their local herpetologist before they go rubbing any caviar all over their genitals.
So you are saying that you would not touch a fish. Is this true, Goat? Would you touch a fish if a fish came to you and said, "Oh, I'm a fish. Oh, I just long to be touched by goat. I long to be touched by goat." We are not saying that this is all fish. We are just saying, suppose a fish came to you and it said, "Oh, I long for the verses of goat. I long for the verses of goat." Are you to say that you would not versus this fish? It is up to you. We are not saying that you should or you should not. We are just wondering, would you really say no to a versus of that fish? What of you, Victor Jr.? Have you rubbed caviar on your genitals? I believe was the question.
Jesus, no. It's been a long versus, and I'm going in and out. But no, I can easily say off the top of my head, I have not.
Let this be a versus to you all. As the fence sitter starts off the versus, it is right there with Goat versus Fish. And as the versus goes on, Goat versus Fish continues the strong and mighty versus of Goat versus Fish. And the fence sitter is just fading in and out of the fence, fading in and out of the fence. Do not despair. We celebration with you. Goat versus Fish is not an easy versus. It's not an easy versus to keep up to.
If you made yourself out of fish, would you be selfish?
Goat versus Fish. Judge Goat versus Fish approves of this versus. Yes, this is a mighty versus. This is a mighty versus. Celebration. If you made yourself out of fish, would you be selfish? You have been accused. Fish has been accused of being selfish by the goat, of being selfish by the goat.
Mermaids. Beautiful, mysterious, alluring. I don't even know what you would call a goat-human hybrid, except for fugly.
Did you hear it laughing at its own verses there at the end of the verses? Goat-human hybrid. Goat-human hybrid. What is a human? Goat versus fish. Victor Martinez Jr. Is this to say that a goat human is a hybrid of a goat and a goat, or is it some sort of Capricorn goat fish versus? What is a human? Is a human a goat or a fish?
I'm not fairly sure, but I think that Baphomet is a goat human. I think,
but it is a goat. We thought
yes.
They said it was goat.
A goat human is definitely a goat. I don't know what you would call it other than, like she said, fugly.
Fugly goat.
Oh wait, okay, no wait. There are satyrs. There are satyrs. But my fugly comment stands.
Goat versus fish. It says we have the satyr versus. Are you sated with goat versus fish? Have you had enough goat versus fish? Are you sated with goat versus fish, or do you just say, give me more goat versus fish, give me more goat versus fish? Follow Goat vs. Fish on all social media at Goat vs. Fish and on twitch.tv/Goat vs. Fish. Celebration, go to goatvsfish.com/store and you can buy verses of Goat vs. Fish. Fugly goats, the verses stand. The verses stand for fugly goats.
Okay, there, Worm. It's not herpetologist, that's a study of reptiles. And ichthyologist is a study of fish. Blub, blub, blub.
Laying down the verses, laying down the knowledge of fish. This is a very knowledgeable fish.
It is known as a satyr. Thank you very much. Yes, the god of wine himself is a satyr.
Wine. Oh, the fence sitter is always whining to Goat versus Fish. Fence sitter is always whining to Goat versus Fish. Correction from Goat. The goat says, pronunciation is not as the fish said. Yes, they are now in the case of Goat versus Fish. In the case of Goat versus Fish, they are really getting down to no pronunciation as this. No, you say the verses as this. No, this is Goat. They are crossing out one verses. They are rewriting in other verses. This verses is getting right down to how it is written, how it is said. Yes, this is a very fine verses. Some verses of Goat versus Fish, they are epic, sprawling verses that last forever. Other verses are just about, but if we just put one slight little verses over here, then it is Fish. But if we slightly adjust the verses, then it is Goat. Verses large and small, verses short and tall.
Baphomet is human from the waist up and the neck down. That's fine, because that's usually all I need.
Okay.
Shout outs to Baffy.
There you go.
All you need is Goat. All you need is Fish. All you need is Goat, Fish. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish would like to learn that verses. We shall have to learn that verses.
was beautiful.
Gather
We're down to
round
the
while
final
I
verses
sing
here.
you of goat
After
and of
this, it's been
fish.
such a long verses. I know the verse must go on, but I'm gonna have to get up off the fence here in a minute after this final verse.
You will listen
I
to the
would
final
love,
verse. You listen to the
I
final
would
verse, and then
love for the goat verses, for the verses to continue. I think that the verses will always continue, of course, without me, as it should. But the fence sitter is tired of balancing on this fence. Let's go ahead and play the final
sitter
verses.
tires of goat versus fish. Well, let us listen to these final verses. Let us listen to quickly these final two verses, and then we shall end the verses, and you can give your final summation of the verses of goat versus fish, and then it shall be goat versus fish. Yes, and it was written.
And it was written. But as I said before, I think goat versus fish should continue. If not tonight, then perhaps another night. Just recruiting goats or fishes, maybe in like a fast pace. I'd love to hear that, from the other side. Just putting that
Thank
out
you.
there.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we shall do this, fence sitter. We shall do this, fence sitter. Goat versus fish shall do this, fence sitter.
No, it's not because it's a fish you're rubbing on your genitals. It's because you have herpes that you need to consult the herpetologist. Come on.
Goat versus fish. You are speaking of herpes. If herpes is a goat or a fish, goat versus fish. You are making goat versus fish sore with all these fancy verses. It is about goat. It is about fish. Just goat versus fish. We have heard so many verses. Thank you for all of your verses. Thank you for all of your verses. Herpes.
I give Worm a lot of credit. He's been the only goat
mighty
tonight.
Goat.
And
mighty goat.
He's been doing good. He's been doing real good. That's a lone goat tonight. Lone goat.
Mighty goat. Mighty goat.
I want to thank you, Goat versus Fish. Although I don't know who you are, I definitely give you props for sticking to this. You stayed in character. Victor Martinez, very cool, chilling. Hope I impressed you with my shit fuckery. If not, there's always next time. Guys, have a good night. Peace out.
Awesome.
It's Meow.
Celebration for Worm the Goat. Celebration for Worm the Goat. Yes. Thank you. But do not impugn the character of Goat versus Fish. Never impugn the character of Goat versus Fish. I am Goat versus Fish, the Goat Fish, the unity and disunity of Goat and Fish. And this is Goat versus Fish. And this is Goat versus Fish. It's Neo. Thank you. It's Neo, the fish. Very special fish to Goat versus Fish. Now has been here for two verses. Celebration for the case of It's Neo, the fish, and the case of Worm the Goat. It is a very difficult verses. The verses shall recess. And we shall begin Goat versus Fish again at the next verses. Continue to gather your evidence to present before Goat versus Fish. Enjoy your verse giving. For this verses. Who does triumph, the goat or the fish? Well, the case of Goat versus Fish shall continue, but it is true that in this verses, we are sorry, Goat, but there were more fish in the verses of Fish versus Goat. There were more fish than Goat, and in the verses of how many goat and fish, it is the fish that do triumph over the goat. The fish do triumph over the goat. The fish did triumph over the goat in the verses of how many goat and fish.
Fishy side-eye night tonight. This verses was.
We hope to see you all on more Goat versus Fish, on all social media at Goat versus Fish, and on the twitch.tv at Goat versus Fish. If you want to see what looks like Goat versus Fish, go to twitch.tv/Goat versus Fish. Go to goatversusfish.com for all your Goat versus Fish. Victor Martinez, Fenciter, do you have any final verses?
No, thank you so. I love this. I want to do it every week. And I want Goat versus Fish to be on stereo more often as well. And let's just go ahead and hear this last verses before we sign off.
Celebration.
Thank you for another lovely verses. I loved it. It was the perfect way to end the day. I adore it. I will be back whenever at all possible for every Goat versus Fish episode on stereo. And if you need, I could become a fence sitter if necessary for a short period of time. I could sit there with you, Goat versus Fish, if you needed another person in the passenger seat for the verses. I will offer up my services for the verses.
I was just about to say, I think you should totally go live. There should be a verses with the verses, and then it's in the Fishy now. But you don't have to be a fence sitter to be here. I believe the verses will go live with Fish or Goat. Probably
true verses.
preferably
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, we will do this with you. We can schedule a versus. Communication with Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish will go live with any goat or fish or a fence sitter. Yes, we shall make communication together. Goat versus Fish, if you must go fence sitter, then you must go. But Goat versus Fish is going to just sing one final song of the ending of the verses, if you wish.
Please do. And
Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. This was a versus. The verses come to an end. Oh, the verses come to an end. My goat and my fish, and even my fence-sitterly friend. The verses come to an end. Where can you come and where can you go? What can you see and what can you show? How can you learn and how can you grow? Does anyone even know? No. Does anyone even know? Goat versus fish, goat versus fish, goat versus fish saying thank you to you. And Victor Martinez celebration! Goat versus fish is thanking to you. Always to be thanking goat versus fish. Man, girl, woman, boy, baby, person, or child. Man, girl, woman, boy, baby, person, or child. Are they goat or are they fish? Man, girl, woman, boy, baby, person, or child. This could go on for a while, and it shall be forever. It shall be forever. It should go on for a while. It should go on for a while. This could go on for a while. It's goat versus fish.
Thank you for this verses. Thank you for this verses. Yeah, like I said, if it chooses to continue, as it should, if the verses continues, I will be listening high up on the fence. You guys have a good night.
And it was written, and it was written.